Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the economies in both Russia and India, who are the founding members of the BRICS alliance. That stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who joined later. And Donald Trump is currently on a mission to break BRICS. And he's now focusing in on India's relationship with Russia because despite the fact that India is an ally of the West, it's been buying huge amounts of oil from Russia throughout the war in Ukraine. Now, on the 30th of July, Donald Trump posted this on his Truth social media website, basically saying that whilst India is our friend, we have over the years done relatively little business with them because their tariffs are far too high, among the highest in the world. And he's referring to the tariffs that India is charging on American imports. And they have the most strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country. Also, they have always bought a vast majority of their military equipment from Russia and are Russia's largest buyer of energy, along with China, at a time when everybody wants Russia to stop the killing in Ukraine. All things not good. India will therefore be paying a tariff of 25% plus a penalty, which is 10% for being a member of BRICS, starting on the 1st of August. Now, this announcement was actually a shock to India. They were expecting to get a tariff of somewhere between 10 and 13%. So 25% plus a 10% penalty for being in BRICS was almost 3 times higher than they were hoping for. Now, just before we go on with today's video, I want to ask anybody that isn't subscribed to please hit that subscriber button because it makes me feel better and also helps me with the algorithm. And I know that more than half of you that are watching these videos are not subscribed. It doesn't cost you anything. All it takes is 1 second of your day to hit that subscriber button right now, and we can move on. Now, on the 31st of July, Donald Trump posted this saying, "I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together for all I care. We've done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. Likewise, Russia and the USA do almost no business." So he's referencing the fact that India and Russia do have a strong relationship and saying that he doesn't care what goes on. However, he's followed that up on the 4th of August with something else that shows that he does actually care. And it said, India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then, for much of the oil purchased, selling it on the open market for big profits. Now, that's referring to the fact that India has a big refinery industry. So it buys in crude oil, refines it, and then sells the refined products such as gasoline, kerosene, and diesel into the markets. And we'll go on to have a look at the details of that in a moment. He went on to say they don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. Because of this, I will be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the USA. Thank you for your attention. Now, this is actually going to be a major problem from India's point of view because the USA is its biggest single export market. So the last thing that India wants are further tariffs. And this could potentially mean that India now has to make a choice between continuing its relationship with Russia or selling things to the USA. Now, before we go on any further today, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Hypnosia, which is a revolutionary self-hypnosis app that can help you deal with a variety of different issues, such as your relationship with food if you're looking to lose weight, any journey you have with addiction if you have an addictive personality, your motivation for fitness, and my own personal issue, which is overcoming sleep problems. Hypnosia enables you to harness the power of your subconscious mind to create long-lasting behavioral changes. And it's easy to integrate these short sessions into your day and your schedule. If you're looking to address weight loss, then Hypnosio could be a fantastic option for you. It has multiple series dealing with issues such as craving control, what triggers you to be eating badly, how you can address your calorie intake and move yourself towards long-term healthy eating that is a sustainable plan for you. I found Hypnosia to be hugely positive and to introduce major changes for me in terms of overcoming my insomnia and helping me to relax and get to sleep at night. And the great news is that Joe Blogs viewers can get a 15% discount on Hypnosia subscription by clicking the link in the description below. Now, in terms of answering the question as to why Donald Trump is so annoyed about what India is doing, this chart shows Russia's exports of oil broken down by the countries that are buying them between 2021 and 2024. And the colour coding at the top here, we've got dark blue is the European Union, light blue the UK and the USA, pink is China, yellow is India, and grey are others. So you can see that in 2021, the biggest single buyer of Russian oil was the European Union. Not surprisingly, we've talked about that a lot. The pipelines were set up to supply all of those countries with oil, and there were no problems with regards to sanctions. And in those days, India was only buying 1.32% of all Russian exports. And that didn't even make it in terms of the roundings when we're talking about millions of barrels of oil per day. Now, 2022 was when the war in Ukraine started. It kicked off at the end of February. And if we have a look at what Russia sold to India in 2022, it increased to almost 12% of its exports. And that was 1 million barrels per day. So that's per day. So that's 365 million barrels per year. I did the magic calculation of multiplying 365 by 1. Now, if we look at 2023, you can see that India actually became a major player in terms of who was buying Russian oil. And the percentage of Russian oil being sold to India increased to just under 30%. And it doubled to 2 million barrels per day. And in 2024, it remained at that level. So without India actually stepping in to make up this gap, it would have left a huge black hole in Russia's finances. And that's one of the reasons why President Trump is so upset about what India is doing. And if we have a look at the economics of this, this chart shows the value of Russian oil being sold to various countries. Again, we've got color coding across the top here. And the key ones that I'm looking at are China in red and India, which is browny beige color. Well, it certainly is. It looks like it to me. I know some people disagree with my color choice, but anyway, that's what I'm seeing it as, browny beige. And interestingly, you can see that India is currently purchasing 73 million euros of oil from Russia per day. And if I just quickly translate that into dollars, that's around $79 million. And if we multiply that by 365 to give us the annual total, that is $29 billion per year that India is currently paying to Russia for the supply of oil. Now, as you can see from this chart, that's actually more than China. China is buying around $61 million of oil per day, which equates to around $22 billion. And the reason why China is buying less than India is because it's paying a lower price. Russia has actually set up some pipelines to deliver oil to China, which is sold at a lower price. You don't have to add in all of the transport costs. It's easier just to feed the oil into the pipeline and send it through to China. So India is actually the single biggest purchaser of Russian oil. And you can see from this chart, it's making up around about 50% of all of the revenue that Russia is pulling in. Now, if we have a look at this chart, it shows the value of oil products. So these are refined oil products such as gasoline and diesel that Russia is selling. And it's the same color coding that we saw before. But as you can see, the sales to India and China are very small. So the majority of oil products are going elsewhere. They're not going to India and China. They're actually going to places like Turkey. And the reason for that is because India has a huge refining industry. It's actually built lots of oil refineries, despite the fact it doesn't actually produce a lot of its own oil. It buys in crude oil, then puts it through that refinery process, which creates employment in India. So you can hire all of the people to work in that industry. And then, and this is the critical issue that Donald Trump is focused in on, it sells those refined oil products like petrol, gasoline, diesel to the rest of the world. And the problem with that is that India is using Russian oil to feed its refinery industry. So essentially, it's selling Russian oil in a slightly different format to anybody that wants to buy it, including the West, who are sanctioning Russian oil. And if you look at this table, you can see that in April, May, and June, these are the daily volumes of refined oil products that India exported. And you can see that in April, it was just under a million barrels per day. In May, it was 1.32, and in June, it was 1.2. So, of the 2 million barrels of oil that India is buying from Russia, it's not using that oil for its own purposes. What it is doing is taking in the oil, refining it, breaking it down into more usable substances, and then selling all of those substances on the global markets. So essentially, in a backdoor way, India is facilitating the world use of Russian oil by changing it. And so nobody is able to actually know that it is Russian. They think it's Indian gasoline and diesel, but actually it's Russian gasoline and diesel that's just been processed by India and then sold on. So what we are seeing here is India is basically giving all of this money, $29 billion per year, to Russia to keep the Russian oil industry going, and it's benefiting from it itself. And Donald Trump has decided that enough is enough, and this has to stop. And I think one of the other things that is an issue between the USA and India at the moment is, as mentioned in Donald Trump's Truth Social posting, where India is buying its arms from. And this chart shows the source of all of the Indian military spending dating back to 2000. And the blue section at the bottom here, which is by far the largest, represents all of the purchases from Russia. So you can see that back in 2000, it equated to around 79% of India's purchases. Today, it's down to around 40%, but that's still the biggest single purchase. If you look at the top where the yellow section is, the USA equates in 2024 equated to 8.7%. So India has a strong relationship with Russia on a military footing and also from an oil perspective. And I think that's the root cause of the problem, is that Donald Trump is now saying, well, if you want to carry on dealing with Russia, if you want to carry on buying lots of oil from Russia, then that's fine. But if you do so, then we are going to hit you very, very hard with regards to the tariffs. Now, there is a strong trade relationship between India and Russia. In the last 12 months to March 2025, the two countries did around $70 billion worth of trade. However, the vast majority of that trade, 93%, so around 63 billion, was Russia selling oil products to India. And India only exported $4.9 billion worth of goods to Russia. So very, very small compared to the US market, which is significantly larger. So India now has a very difficult decision to make. If it wants to continue its relationship with Russia, if it wants to remain as a member of BRICS, then it may have to give up all of its export markets into the USA. Now, I don't think India wants to do that. It wants to have its cake and eat it. It wants to do both. It wants to carry on dealing with Russia and also keep selling things into the USA with no tariffs. But unfortunately, that isn't going to be an option. And there is going to come a point very soon where India needs to make a choice between either the USA and the West or Russia. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think the relationship between India, Russia and the USA is really quite fascinating at the moment. When Donald Trump first took over as the president, it looked like he was going to offer President Putin an olive branch and give him an out in terms of the war in Ukraine and basically come to some form of peace settlement that looked likely to give Russia all of the land that it's currently occupying in Ukraine. That looked like it was going to happen. However, Russia hasn't really played ball. President Putin hasn't agreed to come around the table. He hasn't agreed to any sort of peace deal. And President Trump is now ramping up the pressure on Russia. So he's told President Putin that he has a defined period of time to end the war. Otherwise, secondary sanctions are going to be put in place against all countries that continue dealing with Russia. And it's been talked that that will be 100% tariff or maybe even as high as 500%. I talked about that in a previous video. There's actually some proposals in the USA at the moment that it should be 500%, which obviously would kill all of the exports into the USA from places like China and India. Now, both of those countries know that that is the biggest market in the world and it's their biggest single export revenue from a revenue point of view. So they won't want to walk away from the USA to carry on the relationship with Russia, particularly as neither India nor China exports huge quantities to Russia. It isn't really a particularly big market for them. So Donald Trump is focusing in on the trade relationship, and he's trying to exert pressure on India and China, who are founder members of BRICS, to walk away from Russia. Now, as we've seen in today's video, he's now actually ramping up the pressure on India already, because India has become the biggest single purchaser of oil products from Russia. It's buying large quantities of crude and then using that crude itself to process it to make gasoline and diesel and then make a profit in the international market. So that's been a very nice relationship for India over the past few years. However, Donald Trump is not prepared to continue to let that happen. And he's asked India to make a choice, either to stop buying Russian oil or to stop exporting things to the USA. And he said that the tariff is now going to increase significantly. So we're seeing a lot of pressure being applied on India. And I think from India's point of view, if they have to make an economic decision on this matter, then it's a bit of a no-brainer. They can buy oil from anywhere in the world. They can buy oil from all of the other oil-producing nations. They don't have to buy it from Russia. The only reason why India is buying Russian oil is because it's being given to them at a huge discount. They're getting it cheaper than they could buy oil elsewhere. But if they were to change their buying pattern, it would only impact the Indian economy by around $4 or $5 billion per year. However, if they were to lose all of their exports to the USA, we are talking tens of billions of dollars of lost revenue. But also, if you think about the employment involved in that, all of the companies that are dealing with the USA, whether it be goods or services, because India offers a lot of services these days, all of those people would lose their jobs. And that's not something that India wants to happen, because they've got a population of 1.4 billion. They need people to be in employment. So when you're looking at the facts, India could buy its oil from elsewhere. It'd be a little bit more expensive, but not that much. Or it can walk away from the relationship with the USA and see millions of people being put out of work and lose tens of billions of dollars of revenue. So I don't think India will want to make that choice. Now, from Russia's point of view, this could be absolutely disastrous, because Russia has only managed to survive since the sanctions have been put into place because it's been able to sell huge quantities of oil, 2 million barrels of oil per day to China and 2 million barrels of oil per day to India. If it was to lose India as a customer, there isn't an alternative market to place that 2 million barrels of oil. It doesn't exist. There aren't any more buyers to step into India's shoes. And the problem that Russia has is that it doesn't have anywhere to store that oil. So if it loses India as a customer, it will have to cut its production down. Now, currently, Russia produces around 9 million barrels of oil per day. If it was to cut back 2 million, then that would be a significant portion. We're talking around about 25% of all of Russia's output. And as we've talked about before, you can't just switch off and switch on oil. It doesn't work like that. If you close down a production facility and then in the future the sanctions are lifted, it will be extremely difficult to get that facility operational again, because everything would be closed down and it just wouldn't work as well in the future. Now, Russia is already experiencing major problems because it lost its trading relationships with companies like ExxonMobil, BP and Shell. So it's struggling in terms of keeping up with technology and keeping everything operational. And the last thing that it needs at the moment is to lose India as a customer. But more importantly, it would lose all of the revenue. As we talked about today, India is currently buying around $29 billion worth of oil directly from Russia. If it loses that revenue, then the Russian economy will be thrown completely into disarray, because it's already banking losses. It doesn't have enough money coming in to fund all of its expenditure. And if it was to lose $29 billion plus have an industry that would then be on its knees in terms of the oil industry, this could be absolutely calamitous for both the Russian oil industry and the Russian economy. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and thank you so much to everyone that's supported me. If you bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks, really appreciate that. And if you're a long-term supporter, either through Patreon or YouTube membership or Buy Me a Coffee membership, thank you so much for that support. Really helps to keep me motivated, and here's something to put a smile on your face.